Hi, shalom friends. I'm sure you've all seen images of the aftermath of a hurricane. Now the hurricane itself has tremendous intensity of wind, but in the majority of cases, at least what I recall, the damage is from the surge of water. And even though it's so interesting in the concept, water is really, it shows so little resistance. I mean, even a child could put his hand through water. At the same time, when the water gathers, it becomes an incredibly powerful force which can be used for the negative, as we've seen, as well as the positive through the production of electricity, etc. But I've never seen one drop of water coming from heaven that has been instrumental in changing a person's life. But I'm going to tell you a story how one drop of water from a human being did. The drop of water I'm referring to is a teardrop. Tears are just basically water. The power of a tear, one tear, could change a person's life. So this story happened in the city/town of Radom. I think it's in Lithuania. And Radom was known because of its great rabbi. He was a beloved teacher of Israel, a great scholar, and a great tzaddik, righteous, saintly person. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Meir, and he's known by the title Chofetz Chaim, because that's one of the books that he wrote. So the Chofetz Chaim had a yeshiva for budding Talmudists. And, each person gets tested in his own way. Some people have a weakness for money. Some have a weakness for untruth. There was one young man who was actually quite a scholar and religious in observance, but he was a smoker. And he found keeping away from smoking on Shabbos very difficult. Now, of course, you're not permitted to smoke on the Sabbath. You're making a fire, etc. So he held himself back. But one time, it seems, he was not able to hold himself back, and he snuck out of the yeshiva and went somewhere, perhaps in the forest, and he smoked. Little did he know that one of his companions happened to be going for a Shabbos stroll and could not believe what he saw. One of the religious students, quite scholarly, was smoking on Shabbos. To go over to him and say, don't you know? Of course he knew. And he wasn't sure of what he should do, because he was concerned that perhaps if he would confront him, this person would just maybe drop Judaism. So he went to the rabbi, the Chofetz Chaim, and mentioned that he saw so-and-so doing this and this on this Shabbos, and he's asking the Rabbi for advice. The Rabbi was shocked. He said, call him, I'd like to speak with him. Later on that day, the friend that saw his colleague smoking goes over to him and he says, our Rebbe would like to see you. He was a little surprised, because this was not the ordinary time of an audience, nor did he like to take the Rebbe's time. He had utmost respect, almost reverence before his rabbi. So he walked in with a fair amount of trepidation. The Chofetz Chaim was perhaps sitting and called him over and asked him, didn't ask him actually, he took his hand and put it between his two hands. Now this student that told over the story said the Rebbe's hands were very, very soft. And I wasn't sure what did he want to do. Was he conveying love or warmth or welcome? And then the Chofetz Chaim took one of the hands and stroked him lightly on the hand and whispered Shabbos. And then he did it a second time. But when he did it the second time, his eyes welled up with tears. And he stroked my hand the second time and he said, Shabbos. And one teardrop fell on my hand. And he says, I cannot explain this to you, but it felt like boiling oil. It not only touched my hand, it seared my hand, and it didn't stop there. It went through my heart as well. That's all he said. Shabbos, 2 or 3 times. And then he looked at me, and I understood that the audience was over. He said, from that day onwards, I never smoked on Shabbos. The power of a teardrop. Now, a tear from the Chafetz Chaim, what was it? I don't know. He was a saint, he was a tzaddik, but one thing is for certain, that in that tear, there was all of the sincerity and all of the love that he had for Shabbos was conveyed in that tear. And I think about the story because it's not only a tzaddik that could do that. All of us have shed tears. Some of us had shed tears when we didn't get a job. Some kids obviously share their tears when they don't make it on the team. Many of us have shed tears on the loss of a loved one. How many of us have actually shed a tear because the sanctity of Shabbos was being desecrated? How many people have ever shed a tear that Hashem's glory, this beautiful world, is not the way it should be because of man, not because of God? We have actually a tradition that every genuine tear is saved. I know on earth you dry it, but it actually is saved in heaven. And there's a well-known Hasidic story of one of the great tzaddikim, Rabbi Yitzchak Avarka, who actually was privileged to see a river in heaven. And when he was asked, what is this body of water in heaven? He was told, these are the tears from Jewish people that have shed tears over exile. And the Rabbi wrote that he could not tear himself away from this river, a river of tears. Now, the purpose of this little talk is not to get you to cry. I doubt you will in any case. But that's not the point at all. It's not sadness. It's more the idea that we could also shed tears of joy. And we've been there. Sometimes when the news is so good, or when you see someone that you truly missed, and you just can't contain it, your eye wells. And tears are purifying. Because what tears symbolize for a person is the ultimate in truth and the ultimate in sincerity. So with this, I close. May Hashem look at all of the tears throughout history, both the tears of grief and sadness, sorrow, as well as the tears of joy that have been shed on His behalf, and let Him bring the righteous Mashiach, which in turn it says, and at that time Hashem will wipe away the tears from all mankind. Amen.